Starting us off, the number 10 is the first Egyptian alphabet. Now if we're talking hieroglyphics, and you bet your ass I'm going to start off with hitting you guys with some ancient Egyptian facts. So in the 1990s, Yale archaeologists John and Deborah Darnell uncovered 2 inscriptions at the Wadi El Hol, which translates to Gulch of Terror. The hieroglyphics were carved into a limestone wall alongside hundreds of other inscriptions from 4,000 years ago. The duo were able to recognize some of the glyphs, but the rest were just a mystery. The glyphs look like they were one of the earliest transitions from hieroglyphics to an alphabetical system in Egypt. These specific ones were from 1800 BC, and the Darnells were shocked these people were trying to spread real modern writing amongst people that had no writing system. The hieroglyphics I've seen in movies and pictures are usually quite intricate and pictorial, but these ones were more loose and flowy, and there was just less literal representation of words, if that makes any sense at all. Coming in at number 9 is the Setovo inscription. So back in 1928, the inscription was found by an archaeological expedition led by Alexander Peave. The inscription itself is 2 lines of carvings 3.4 meters long, and the individual letters are 40 centimeters tall. But before the expedition found it, a group of woodcutters actually discovered the markings and thought it would lead to hidden treasure. Spoiler alert, it didn't. The archaeologists had no idea what the inscription said, and in a plot twist turn of events, Alexander Peave was actually executed shortly after on suspicion for being a secret Soviet agent. The evidence held against him was the fact he had sent a weird coded message to the Soviet Union, which was actually just a copy of the inscription in hopes that they could decipher it. Many have tried to translate it, but all have failed. Can you believe that? Alexander died for this and we still haven't figured it out. This is shocking. Shocking. At number 8 we have Proto-Elamite. Now this glyph system was used in Iran almost 5,000 years ago. It's written and read from right to left, very much like Arabic, and that's about all we know about it, so let's move on. No, I'm just kidding. So it's true we don't know much about it, except that the system was used in a large geographical area, and that the Proto-Elamites did a really bad job of keeping the symbols they invented in any sort of organized order. The symbols were carved in clay, and they're a lot less descriptive or telling than Egyptian glyphs. These ones are like shape and line centric, where a numerical sign will usually follow the object it's counting. Experts actually called on the public to help decipher the tablets, and that project is still going on till this day, so good luck to you guys. Filling our number 7 slot is Linear A. So back in 1893, an archaeologist called Sir Arthur Evans, very fancy, decided to buy some ancient stones from a flea market in Athens. The stones had mysterious inscriptions on them which he couldn't make any sense of. When he later went back to Crete to work on the excavations at Narcissus, he realized the glyphs on his stones and the engraved tablets he was finding on the island were very similar. He split the writing systems into 2, Linear A and Linear B. Linear A was the primary script used by Minoans in religious writings and in the palace. Linear B was deciphered in the 1950s, and it turns out it was actually just an early form of Greek, and Linear A still hasn't been deciphered. Since the 2 have a lot of similarities, experts tried using what symbols they knew from B for A, but it just translated into nonsensical words. The glyphs themselves are kind of like Egyptian hieroglyphs, except less developed and detailed maybe, and that's just an observation from someone completely not qualified to make observations about this. Nobody trusts me. Now at number 6 is the Cascajal block. Found in Mexico by road builders in the late 90s, the Cascajal block is an iPad-sized writing slab which has been said to be as old as 1st millennium BCE. The 11 kg block was found among other ceramic pieces that were dated to the Olmec culture that ended in 900 BCE. This made it overtake the Zapotec writing, which was dated 900 BC and was the world's oldest writing before that. Archaeologists from Brown University described the glyphs as the earliest writing system in the New World. The 62 glyphs themselves, honestly, and I mean no disrespect, look like a children's drawing. Like if you asked a kid to draw a bug or a knife or a fire, I feel like this is the result you'd get. But even then, they still haven't ever been able to translate it properly, so there's that. Coming in at number 5 is the Indus script. 4,000 years ago, the Indus Valley civilization was what Pakistan, Iran, Afghanistan, and India are now. Now, the Indus script is the earliest form of writing from the Indian subcontinent, and we still have no idea what it says, which is just great. I mean, we're out here throwing cheese slices on animals for the gram, but we don't have time to decipher the Indus script. What are we doing? Either way, the script has been found on everything: pottery, bones, ivory, bronze, copper, etc. etc., you name it. And so far there's been no agreement on what language the script even represents. The writing is always accompanied by a picture, and the writing obviously tells the picture's story. A lot of the scenes depicted are myths and stories, and even religious reenactments. The script has around 400 signs, and only 31 of them are used semi-regularly, meaning the rest are rarely even found. So experts guess that they probably were used but just carved into perishable material, which obviously hasn't survived. Or either way, all we really know about it is that it's written from right to left, and even though actually in some cases the direction changes when you go on to the next line. So let me clarify, all we do know about it is that a semicircle represents units of 10. At number 4 are Cretan hieroglyphs. We've already covered Linear A, but 100 years before Linear A was even a thing, Cretan hieroglyphics were already very developed and were the very first writing system in all of Europe. I feel like I've said that about every single one, like the very first writing system and blah blah blah. Either way, Linear A had more rectangular glyphs, whereas Cretan glyphs had actual figurative representations of things like cats and weapons, as well as other glyphs complementing them. Whilst Linear A was mostly found on clay tablets, Cretan texts were on smaller objects like seal stones. Even if we compared Cretan hieroglyphs to all we know and don't know about Linear A and B, it still tells us nothing. From the analysis that's been done on them, experts have found that the Cretan hieroglyphs include 96 syllabograms, which represent sound, but a bunch of them also represent other words, so have we even found anything at all? And they also have 2 types of punctuation. I'll give them that, that's at least, progressive, that's forward, that's modern. Filling our number 3 slot are the Voynich symbols, sometimes referred to as the Danube script. These symbols were found on a bunch of artifacts from the Neolithic era in Central to Southeastern Europe. They were found in 1875 by a Hungarian archaeologist called Sophia Toma. Now experts have agreed the symbols aren't actually a writing system themselves, but some kind of private language. Who knows what private language is? I certainly don't. Either way, some even think it's the earliest known writing system that paved the way for all the others. The symbols themselves kind of just look like numbers in Latin. I mean, one was 3 lines, another was a V and then a line, so it was very Latin-esque, yet they still have pictures and abstract symbols at the same time. The inscriptions are mostly found on pottery and figurines, and 85% of the inscriptions were just one single symbol. So because of that, people initially thought the symbols were just marks of property saying, this belongs to X, but that theory's been abandoned for a while now, so I don't really know what to tell you. Now at number 2 is the Singapore stone. Now this was a huge sandstone slab that was found at the mouth of the Singapore River, and which bore an undecipherable inscription. It was there for about 700 years before workers found it while clearing away the jungle trees to make room for a British fort. Archaeologists have concluded it could be from the 13th century or even as early as the 10th. The stone is absolutely covered in writing, and apparently the person who commissioned the stone was Sumatran. There's even a legend associated with the stone which says a 14th century strongman called Badang threw a stone into the Singapore River, and this was said stone. Modern theories point to the inscription being written in early forms of Sanskrit or Old Javanese, but no one's 100% sure. Either way, the slab got blown up to make way for the fort, and the stone that remains is at the National Museum of Singapore if you're interested in seeing it. No, this was not sponsored by the country of Singapore. Wink wink. And finally, at number 1 is Rongorongo. Now Rongorongo, as fun as it is to say, was actually a glyph system that was discovered when missionaries went to Easter Island in the 1860s and found dozens of wooden tablets. Most of the tablets were actually just irregular pieces of wood or driftwood, and most were really worn down, others were burnt, and the rest were damaged beyond repair. Now the glyphs themselves are mostly just outlines of people, plants, animals, or other forms. Upon seeing the glyphs, the missionaries asked the Rapa Nui natives if they knew what they meant, and were told that no one knows anymore since all the wise men are dead. Apparently only a very small group of elite were literate and knew how to read Rongorongo. Now you're probably wondering how hard could reading it be for the natives, but boy am I about to drop a bomb on you. Now Rongorongo is written in a way where every single line is read in alternating directions. So the first line is read left to right, second line is right to left, third line is read after you turn the tablet 180 degrees, etc. Like, it's incredibly confusing. It's like a crossword of sentences and you're just not trying to drown in it. You're just trying to stay afloat, and you just can't. I couldn't, so.
Number 10. Pompeii graffiti. What do Romans and Zoomers have in common? Probably their love for weird and semi-unfunny memes. Yes, even thousands of years in the past, people were leaving all sorts of tasteful messages on the walls for all to see. Insults, compliments, but more interestingly, threats. Most of these are obviously jovial in nature, but there is one that does stand out as interesting. The message reads, "To the one defecating here, beware of the curse. If you look down on this curse, may you have an angry Jupiter for an enemy." Seems silly enough, right? Well, it is, until you learn that it was found at Pompeii, the city buried by a volcano. Sounds like a fairly wrathful act, eh? Seems like Jupiter was being a bit of a party pooper. Number 9. Hans Holbein's The Ambassadors. Hans Holbein is a classic artist, but one of his most famous works stands out as a grim omen. In 1533, Holbein would be commissioned to portray ambassadors Jean de Dinfy of France and Georges de Sèvres of Lavaur. This work is an excellent piece, but it includes an enigmatic secret, a strangely proportioned skull. There are numbers of theories as to why this was included, one of the most popular coming from Oscar Bachmann and Pascal Grenier, who suggest that the skull is meant to contrast the beauty and value found within life against the grandeur of death. Holbein would pass almost exactly 1 decade later, which arguably completes the implication of this message in its entirety. Number 8. The Voyager messages. The Voyager deep space program helped NASA further its understanding of the solar system with absolutely breathtaking images of the universe that were sent back to Earth. However, those messages weren't the only thing that the Voyagers were meant to carry. Inside each probe is a golden phonograph disc titled The Sounds of Earth, which include several greetings, sounds of whales, a crying baby, waves on a shoreline, music from a scatterplot of important musicians from around the world, and greetings in around 55 different languages. While this seems like a friendly handshake from one part of the universe to another, the question must be asked, what will find this disk? What will they think of us? And what will they do next? The Voyagers are still out there, and they are expected to no longer be able to transmit anything to us in roughly around 2036. Which probably means that if anything does find them, we won't be getting a warning until they're here. Number 7. The Mayan calendar. Portents of doom are common enough in history. However, 2012 was an interesting year for such fears, as the turn of a new millennium caused a number of people to become absolutely certain that the world would end. To justify their claims, they looked to the past, and one message seemed to leave people more certain than others. Now, let's be clear, the Mayans didn't actually make this calendar. That would have to be attributed to the early Mesoamericans, who termed the end of a period of the time as the Baktun. Baktun 13 was the end of a particularly large period, and when lined up with our calendar, it matched up alongside the date of December 2012. So, was the message true? It was fun at the time, but after the date passed, the real horror was revealed as people admitted to selling their possessions and homes with the expectation that they just wouldn't need them anymore. All because of a calendar period ending in a way that most computer technicians would just describe as stack overflow. Like, your car doesn't explode when you max out the mileage counter, it just resets to 0. So the terror here was more that people actually believed this crap, just because the Mesoamericans didn't make a Baktun 14. Jeez. Number 6. Qin Shi Huang's Meteor. So in 211 BC, the Qin dynasty was in full swing and everyone was having a great time, suffering under the rule of their tyrannical overlord Qin Shi Huang. Suddenly, a meteor fell from the sky, landing in the province of Dongjun. Upon inspection, the meteor was revealed to have been inscribed with the words, "The first emperor will die, and his land will be divided." Whether or not this was an elaborate hoax or not, the emperor was paranoid enough to demand that the writer come forward, and when no one did, he had everyone who lived in the area executed. The funny thing is, a year later it came true. Qin Shi Huang died, and while China remained somewhat unified, the Qin dynasty fell only 3 years later. And soon after that, the Han dynasty took over, ending the Qin dynasty's short reign. Unfortunately, the meteor was shattered, so this brilliant moment has been permanently lost to time. Number 5. Egyptian tomb curses. Egypt. One of the greatest civilizations known to mankind. Thank goodness that a bunch of Europeans decided to rob the graves of their ancestors, or else they'd have been really bored or something. However, when these losers decided to pop open those tombs, likely searching for gold, they instead found a cavalcade of curses. Some of these read as such: "Any ruler who shall do evil or wickedness to this coffin, may his heir not inherit. As for all men who shall enter my tomb, there will be judgment. I shall cast the fear of myself into him. And all who enter this tomb will make evil against it. May the crocodile be against them in the water, and the snakes against them on land. May the hippopotamus be against them in water, and the scorpion on land." Aside from being incredibly cool and threatening, these grave robbers were also plagued with visions of ghosts, and many died, usually from disease-carrying insects and violent animals. Who could have seen that coming? Number 4. The Ring of Seraphinianus. This ring was discovered by a farmer plowing his land in 1785, but wouldn't be brought to archaeologists until years later. Made from 12 grams of gold, the ring contains an inscription in Latin which reads "Sine Sine Vivus in Deum," which kind of translates to "live in God," although the ring apparently has some spelling errors, so whatever, it doesn't matter. A tablet was discovered which was inscribed within a curse, claiming that whoever removed the ring would never again be in good health until it was returned to Nodens. The archaeologist who excavated the site decided to call upon a close friend to research the actual location of Nodens, a professor at Oxford named J.R.R. Tolkien. That's right, baby. This little curse inspired the Lord of the Rings. Number 3. The Serbian Skull Tower. Signs are very effective means of ensuring through symbology that people can understand what they mean even without speaking the language of the people that they were made by. For instance, red is generally the color that is universally used to denote that everyone should stop. And skulls usually denote that everyone in the area should probably turn around and leave. There's no better example of this than the Skull Tower, located in Serbia. Apparently, in 1804, there was a Serbian uprising against the Ottomans, an uprising that failed in spectacular fashion. After their battle, the governor of the area decided that the easiest way to ensure no one tried it again was to create a tower out of the skulls of the rebels, sending a very clear message to anyone with seditious thoughts. Just try it. Number 2. The Czech Republic Warning Stones. As the world is racked with an oncoming ecological disaster that you should be as terrified of as I am, artifacts have been uncovered which have revealed some fascinating messages. Prior to the invention of the internet, the residents of the area had the idea to inscribe messages on stones, which would warn people of incoming disasters such as droughts, famines, bad harvests, food shortages, and just incoming hunger in general. This last part led to their being dubbed as the Czech Hunger Stones, with dates going back as far as 1417. Some quotes that can be found on these messages are deeply disturbing, such as, "When you see me, weep." I guess the mourning stones are doing their job pretty well this time around. Number 1. Charles Maffel's final message and Jeremiah Burke's final message. Messages in bottles are some of those neat little things that are synonymous with the adventures of pirates and other seafaring individuals. These messages aren't exactly as whimsical. In 1909, the vessel Waratah set sail from South Africa to Australia, but went missing at sea. Numerous people attempted to claim that they'd received letters in bottles from drowned sailors, and while most were clearly fake, one did prove to be genuine, matching with the sailor's handwriting and the time with which he would have had to write it. The message reads, "Top heavy. One side awash. Goodbye, mother and father." Signed, Charles McFell, Greaser. Several years later, a similar incident would occur with the sinking of the Titanic and the discovery of a letter sent from Jeremiah Burke, reading, "From Titanic. Goodbye all. Burke of Glanmire, Cork." The message was written on a scrap of paper, then placed inside an empty bottle of holy water given to the man by his mother prior to the voyage. She died before she could read it.
Starting us off with number 10 is the Incest Diary. I told you guys it can appear in any video, always be prepared for it. Published in 1999, the book goes into excruciating detail about a girl's incestuous relationship with her dad. The abuse began when she was 14 and lasted till her late 20s. Wow. The woman even tried going to the police to file charges against her dad, but the officer said it had been too long and that she should just write her story down. Justice, the police, it's nothing, he said. And so she did. She wrote a book. The book goes from flashbacks to her childhood to adulthood. It has her inner monologues that contradict themselves constantly. Her manic fixations are clear in the book, and she goes into detail about how it informed every single thing she ever did, how she sought the abuse and reenacted it in other relationships, how if anything she started craving the abuse. The book sold more than 70,000 copies in France in the first 3 months after its release. I mean, it's dark, it's graphic, and it's anonymous. Coming in at number 9 is A Woman in Berlin. This one came out in English in 1954, and it's said to be memoirs of an anonymous German woman. It covers April to June 1945 when the Red Army occupied Berlin. The woman is a journalist, and she goes on to describe really dark subject matter like getting gang raped by Russian soldiers and trying to survive in the situation by dating a Soviet officer, and how other girls had to make similar decisions. Women literally had no protection from anyone at that time, so it really was eat or be eaten. When it was first published in Germany, it was met with a lot of disgust since it was just too soon to talk about the German suffering, but 2 years after Hitler died, the book was republished and was on the bestsellers list for more than 20 weeks. The author was actually revealed in 2003 posthumously by Jens Bisky, a literary editor. She identified the author to be Marta Hillers, and Marta's publisher was absolutely livid at the invasion of privacy that had caused. I don't get why people can't just let other people remain anonymous. Like, can everyone just live their lives and stop interfering in other people's lives? That'd be great. At number 8 we have Go Ask Alice. Now this book was published anonymously in 1971, and it revolves around the diary of a girl who gets addicted to drugs at 15 and then runs away from home. It's funny, when I saw this book in a bookshop a few years ago, I really wanted to read it, but I had way too many unread books at the time on my shelf, so I didn't get it, but it's ironic, it's popped up into my life once again. But anyway, the book follows this girl as she goes through heartbreak, intense drug use, rape, body image, social acceptance, etc. It's sort of a coming of age story if anything, but laser focused on drugs. She basically moves city due to her dad's job and goes home one summer to stay with her grandparents. She attends a party, she tries a drink laced with LSD unknowingly, and so begins the journey of drugs. If you're interested in the title of the book, it's actually referencing a song called White Rabbit, which is alluding to Alice in Wonderland. Alice eats and drinks a bunch of things that change her size, so they're kind of linking that to a drug experience. But there is a twist, and it's not the book's ending. Controversy sparked in the 70s because of Beatrice Sparks and people thinking she was the author of the book. She was initially credited as the editor, but then records showed she was the sole author, and then apparently it was the diary of a deceased teenager. I mean, it's really all over the place, but the book does look amazing, but also scarily real. Filling our number 7 slot is Diary of an Oxygen Thief, and I've heard of this one too, and the title alone is just hilarious. Aren't we all just low-key oxygen thieves? Rudy. Either way, published in 2006, the book is a Dutch novel also written in the style of a memoir. That's 4 books in a row now that have been memoirs and anonymous. Honestly, people want to reveal their dirty secrets but not want to reveal themselves. It is what it is, guys. Either way, the book is about an Irish man who is an alcoholic and who takes pleasure in emotionally abusing women. What a catch. The man regrets his past relationships as the book goes on, and as he changes jobs, he moves to the US where culture shock happens, addiction and paranoia happens, love happens, everything just goes down, and the book isn't even that long. Self-deprecating humor is the book's forte. I mean, oxygen thief. The narrator doesn't even think he's worth the air he breathes, so I mean, is he or isn't he? Guess we'll have to read it to find out. Now at number 6 is Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, and the plot of this low-key sounds really good, like it could be the next historical film starring Saoirse Ronan for sure. Published sometime in the 14th century, the novel, if you couldn't tell from the Arthurian title, is a Middle English chivalric romance. The plot is actually lit, you guys. It follows Sir Gawain, one of King Arthur's knights, who basically agrees to a challenge from a mysterious Green Knight. The challenge is for any knight to cut the Green Knight with his axe, and he then gets to axe the knight back 1 year and 1 day later. Sir Gawain beheads the dude, and he picks up his head and then reminds him he'll be back on the scheduled date. And so starts the story of Gawain trying to stay loyal and chivalrous and courageous about the agreement and the trials and tribulations along with that. Basically, hero goes on quest and gets tested. End plot. That's like Dungeons and Dragons right there. The book itself is written in stanzas and each one ends in a rhyme, so I know it may be a bit hard to read, but for those who are willing, do you. Coming in at number 5 is Might is Right, and this one is definitely gonna anger all our feminists out there, so here's to hoping this seems problematic to everyone watching, hopefully, fingers crossed. Published in 1890, this non-fiction book is a lot to take in. It focuses mostly on social Darwinism, which applies natural selection and the whole survival of the fittest science to human society and politics. He emphasizes how humans are motivated by our own selfish wants, and we base our decisions on the consequences of them rather than if they're morally right or not. He claims only physical strength can lead to moral right and actively bashes democracy and Christianity. He says BS like weakness should be viewed with hatred and that women and families are the property of men since they are more superior. It was even dubbed as proto-fascist white power manifesto, which I'm inclined to agree with. The author went by the pseudonym Ragnar Redbeard, so that's clearly not a real name, but interestingly enough, a white supremacist publisher and the Church of Satan founder both think Jack London wrote the book, and if he didn't, that's a really brutal accusation by some pretty questionable people. At number 4 is the autobiography of an ex-colored man. What a title. The title itself literally had me. I was like, ex-colored man, what does that even mean? Order on Amazon right now. But anyway, published in 1912, the book is a fictional account of a biracial man whose name we never find out since he's always just called the ex-colored man. The story follows his life living in America at the end of the 19th century when things like lynchings were very much still happening. His dream is to glorify black people through ragtime music, but after seeing the way society worked, he started passing as white to make his life easier and safer. He forms a friendship with a character called the rich white gentleman, and despite being a free man, there were aspects of slave-master dynamics within this relationship. It was originally published anonymously since the author was a diplomat and wasn't sure how controversial the book could be since issues of race and discrimination weren't really discussed in books back then. When it was republished 15 years later and it did moderately well, the author decided to be credited, and so the book's anonymity died in 1927. James Weldon Johnson is the man of the hour, and if you don't know what what that means, that just means he's the author. Filling our number 3 slot is Lazarillo de Tormes. Now this one is actually a Spanish novella that was first published in 1554, probably the oldest book on this list, no doubt. The author chose to remain anonymous because of all the anti-clerical content, and the author was living in Spain. I'm sure he had beef with religious authority, interfering in political matters, and wanted to publicize it but also not get hung for it, so fair enough. The book followed an impoverished boy called Lazaro who goes from master to master. He gets more cunning and smart as he changes masters while simultaneously trying to take over his father's practice. The reason this book is so high up on the list is because it's sort of iconic in many ways. It was credited with inventing the picaresque genre, which basically means the adventures of a slightly rogue hero of lower class who uses his wits to survive in a corrupt society. Unsurprisingly enough, the book got banned by the Spanish crown for dissing the Catholic Church and all aristocracy, and only got unbanned in the 19th century. Now at number 2 is Frankenstein. I know, Mary Shelley, we know she wrote it, don't come for me. She started writing it at 18 and published it at 20. Can you imagine publishing one of the most renowned pieces of gothic fiction at the age of 20? What were we doing at 20? Freaking twiddling our thumbs and playing Temple Run on our iPads probably. Oh, that's what I was doing at 20. Actually, no it wasn't. Cut that out, editor. When it was originally published in 1818, it was done so anonymously for many reasons probably. I mean, she was 20 for one, who's gonna take a 20-year-old seriously? Her dad was a very famous author, so maybe it was also the pressure of living up to that she didn't want, or maybe if it didn't do well, she just didn't want anything to do with it. Many actually thought her husband Percy wrote it since he's the one who wrote the introduction for it. When its second edition was published in 1823, that's actually when she appeared as the author. The novel was met with great success, which let the family move to Italy and get lit really. Actually, no it wasn't lit, her life was very tragic, but yeah, here's to Mary Shelley. And finally, at number 1 is Novel with Cocaine or Cocaine Romance. This one weirdly caught my attention because it's so vague. I was trying to gather as much info about it as I could, but it was actually quite hard. Published in 1934, it's a Russian psychological novel which explores ideology, and I mean it was Russian, communism ideology was important at the time. It explores philosophy and psychology all through the veil of a teen's cocaine addiction. We follow Vadim through school, his experiences with women, what his life is like, what he thinks of everything pre-cocaine, and then obviously after. When it was published, the author was M. Agiev, and that's meant to be the pseudonym for Russian author Mark Levi, but this has never been confirmed, and so it still remains anonymous to this day.